So, you guys may have heard about the Facebook going down. I think most people heard about it. It's kind of a big deal. Facebook and Instagram, you know, inexplicably going down pretty much all the stuff for about a day, right? Which was surprising. But what was more surprising was what happened after. Because when we came back to it, we saw all of these new things, all of these updates that they, I guess, waited to implement until that happened. So that kind of transitions into the main thing I'm talking about today, which is, in this ever-changing world, a lot of the updates and changes, major overhauls, don't happen just when, a whole platform goes down. They're just constantly going on. So the question is, especially, as you get doing these platforms, as you're trying to stay active and, get the most out of these platforms, I mean, simply put, how do you adapt to the changing platforms? Like I said, that's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode of the BB&J Podcast. I'm your host, as almost always, John Lint, and let's get into it. So, platforms are going to change. I mean, things change, right? That's just how it is. But the thing is, you need to change with it. It's really that simple. As platforms adapt, you need to be adapting as well. So, just, there are going to be things that are going to happen that you're not going to notice that don't directly affect you, right? So, we do a lot of work with Facebook. I mean, I'm sure many of you are seeing this on Facebook right now. And if Facebook changed the way that they did Farmville 2, I don't know if that's still a thing. If they updated that wouldn't affect me. That wouldn't really affect my day-to-day work. But if they went ahead and updated Creator Studio or the Facebook Business Suite, which they did do, I would notice that. I did notice that. And it significantly impacted how I had to do my work. So, just I'm sure you're aware of this, but just be aware that not all changes are going to be the end of the world for you. Things might look a little different, but before you go oh my gosh, I need to totally learn this new thing, make sure that the changes that were made impact you directly, impact your productivity, your work directly. Because, if they don't, there's nothing to worry about, really, right? You need to be making sure but you need to make sure that you know that. So, especially when there's a big update, usually they'll have update notes, right? They'll have the little list of this is what we updated, bug fixes, interface, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then, but make sure that I'm not saying if it's a new terms of service, you don't have to read all however long it is. But if a platform has this is what we updated, make sure that you do read that. Just to see, is this going to impact me? Are these features that I use? Is something being added that I could benefit from? Is something being taken away that I did benefit from? And now I'm gonna have to figure out a workaround. That's happened to me more times than I can count. And it really does suck when you were using something you really liked, you really had a good time with, right? It just worked for you, and then it changes, and you never get it back. But the thing is, it's unfortunate. Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand that. But you can either sit around and be oh gosh, what am I gonna do? This platform's useless now. or just, I mean, you do what you have to, right? Which is adapt and move on. You really don't, especially in this modern day, this fast-paced, rapidly changing world we live in, you gotta adapt quickly. And I think that that's the biggest thing. With, as these platforms change, it's the question of figuring out a plan to adapt. So if this is a platform that you work with, you personally, you as an individual, work with a lot, then you know it well enough, right? You'd know it well enough to figure out a way to adapt. But if there's a platform that did a big update and you don't directly work with it, but your team works with it, or a third party that you work with uses it, then, especially if you're a business owner, you should be going to the expert of that platform that you have on team, and figuring out an effective strategy to deal with this change, right? It's not going to be the end of the world because, as with so many things, right? It's like, oh, well, we can't change this or else the whole world will blow up, basically. It'll destroy the economy, whatever. But it's like, no, this has happened before. This has been done several times. People have survived. People have adapted. People have thrived. And that's what's going to happen. At the end of the day, platforms will update. That's what they do. They're trying to learn, improve, adapt to the times. And you just have to adapt with it. It's really that simple. Like when Instagram officially announced that they were going to transition away from being photo focused and focusing more on being short form video focused, especially with Instagram Reels. And for photo focused content creators, that's tough to hear, right? Because they their whole thing was these highly curated, manicured photos that they'd put on, that they do a lot of work in, that they have a lot of experience in, that they've been building their social proof almost for years on Instagram. And it's like, well, what are you supposed to do? You know the answer. They know the answer. I know the answer. Adapt to short form video content. But so the kind of third thing I think I'd like to talk about, and I will say, I think specifically with Instagram, I would like to talk more about it in depth, but I don't want to keep this going for too long or get too off topic. So what I'll do is I'll make another next week's episode probably. I'll talk about the changes that Instagram is making and effective strategies of adapting to that, right? But the last thing is that question of, well, how do you stay up to date, right? That's an important question. With this, you know that platforms are going to be constantly changing. The platforms that you're on, the things that you take for granted, aren't going to be that way forever. So what is the best way to stay on top of those changes so you can adapt quickly and efficiently, rather than a month after the change being like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, what's going on? I have no idea what to do. That's not going to be productive. The first thing you should be doing is just look at the official announcements of the platforms that you are on a lot. So if you're really active on Facebook and Instagram, just keep an eye out for news about Facebook and Instagram, right? I mean, I know about about the whole Instagram change because the head of the company announced that was the plan. Going into from 2021 going into 2022, they are going to continue to transition away from photo as the focus and more short form video as the focus with Instagram Reels. But because I heard about that, we were able to adapt our strategy and the strategy for our clients so that we could be proactive about it. And that's what most of the time we try to do, right? So the ideal scenario is whatever platform announces the changes that they're going to be making, which they usually do. So staying on top of those announcements is going to help you be prepared and adapt. That's why they're around, right? Those announcements are there for people to be like, oh, I need to change things so that when this actually happens, I can adapt. Now, sometimes they're not going to make an announcement and they're just going to kind of do it. And really the only way that you can effectively spot those things is just by, as you're going through the platform, just noticing, get acquainted enough with the platform to know what the homeostasis of it is, really. What the normal flow interface is on that platform. And if that changes, that's an indication to you that something more may have changed. And if there's a small change on the front end, that might be a huge change on the back end, or a small change for the regular users might be a huge change for a business account. So, but Bridget says all the time, a lot of the changes that we find, a lot of the things that we've learned about the platforms, a lot of the things that the new adaptations, it's because things just kind of stop working and then we have to figure out what's going on. With ads, why does Bridget know that her ad strategy works so effectively? Because when it stops working, she has to go and be like, okay, well, what changed that's causing this? And then she addresses it, she adapts to it, and things keep chugging along normally, right? But that adaptation is really the key to all of this. So I think the focus, what I'll say is that announcements that platforms make are kind of like speed limit signs, right? You're driving down the road, you see, you're driving at 45 and you see a speed limit sign for 30. Do you wait until you hit the speed limit sign, until you pass the sign, to then decelerate down to 30? Do you wait until the program, the update has been made to adapt? Or do you slow down so that by the time you cross that 30 mile per hour sign, you are now driving at 30 or 35, 36. But I can tell you this: if there's a cop sitting at the other side, I don't think that they're gonna take the second option as an excuse or as an okay reason to speed, right? Because the fact of the matter is, while you were adapting, you were wrong, basically. You were speeding. So after the change is made, while you were adapting in that little period afterwards, you were wrong. You were, so to speak, you're not going to be getting the engagement. So be proactive. My parting words of wisdom about this is be proactive about making changes. When you see that initial announcement, that's when you need to start working on those updates so that when it gets to the actual thing, you're sitting pretty. And those, the people who weren't paying attention and who are now scrambling and whose engagement and pay-per-click, all that stuff is in the gutter, you're just cruising along, and you'll be doing better relative to the competition that didn't adapt. So, it does take, I mean, as with all these things, right? How many times have I said this about, this, that, and the other? It does take work, but it does make a difference. So that's kind of, that's my 2 cents on staying with the updates. A lot of the major platforms have had a lot of updates recently, and they're going to have a lot of updates soon. So make sure that you stay on top of that and don't let yourself fall behind. And with that, I'd like to thank you so much for listening and or watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. As always, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, etc., you can comment on this video. You can go to bbdigitallab.com/podcast and write whatever message you want. I'll try to address those things. I do try to, if people have questions about things, I try to address them in podcast episodes. And I'd be happy to address your questions. But other than that, I'll see you next week.